It feels a little weird to say this still, but Danielle Smith is now a member of the Progressive Conservative Caucus. On Wednesday, she quit the Wildrose Party that she has led for 5 years in spectacular fashion and took 8 of the remaining Wildrose MLAs with her. Don't feel bad if you didn't see this plot twist coming. You're not alone. I spent most of my week picking my jaw up off the floor. So, Paula and Kathy, can you please just explain to me, to Albertans, what we saw happen this week?
Essentially, we saw the leader of the opposition with 8 of her MLAs trail across the floor and land in Jim Prentice's lap. It was just so amazing and bizarre. It was, I can't even express how strange it was.
Yeah,
we saw an unprecedented, I think, blowing up of democracy in Alberta. I think it was bad before, it's going to get worse now. We saw the Wildrose, especially the leader, Danielle Smith, go back on everything that she stands for. You go back over the years, I think she said about grassroots democracy, consulting with her voters before she does major things. And she just did all this backroom deals. Everything that she has stood up against, it seems she did this week. The last few months. This has been in the works, according to her, for months, according to the Premier for 5 weeks. So it's all through the fall sitting of the legislature, when they were, in question period and things like that, there was talks going on secretly behind closed doors, under the table, to have the majority of the Wildrose join the government. It is, my jaw's still on the floor. We heard about this a few weeks ago.
Alongside mine.
We'd heard rumblings for a while about this. People basically lied to me about it. Oh, no, nothing's going on. And, of course, things were going on.
Oh, well, and actually I've been involved in the coverage of politics since 1981, and I can say I've seen them cross the floor in every direction, left, right, diagonally. I've seen parties rise and fall, Western Canada Concept, anyone? I've seen the end of the mighty SoCreds, when the last 2 SoCred MLAs basically threw in the towel and ran as independents in 1982. I've never seen anything like this, both for the magnitude of it, 9 at once, for the leader actually switching sides, for just the audacity of it, amazing. And the timing is so bizarre. I mean, it's not, if we were close to an election, if they dropped a writ, if something like that had happened, it would have been something. But it just feels like, wow, right in the middle of things, they just tossed it all away. They just decided, we seem to be on a downslide. Let's just give it up and join the other side.
For the leader of the party that is Her Majesty's loyal opposition to somehow take to heart the playground slogan, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em, it just shows so much immaturity and so much intellectual and ethical dishonesty. It's really appalling.
So I'm appalled both at the hypocrisy of Smith, who stood up for one thing in terms of democracy and has just done a backroom deal, but also the fact they were actually in talks for weeks and weeks and weeks while they're pretending to be the government in opposition. That, to me, is another knife in the back of democracy. Besides her going back on her own word and what her principles, the fact that they've done this great sham on Albertans as well as their own supporters.
And there's also a question of betrayal on the other side. I mean, I've talked about the cowardice and hypocrisy of the Wildrose, but let's look at this from the other side. There are lots of angry Wildrose supporters all over social media, but there are angry Conservative supporters too, particularly people on the more progressive side of the party who thought Alison Redford was taking them in a more progressive direction. I mean, think about all the people who voted strategically in the last election for the progressive Conservatives and against the Wildrose because they thought the Wildrose was too right-wing. Well, this is a betrayal of every voter who voted for the Tories on that basis in the last election. So it's not just the Wildrose supporters who have a right to feel that, that they were hoodwinked. I think Tory supporters do too. In a peculiar way, all of the reaction, the outrage, the hurt, the whatever it is a bizarrely noble epitaph for the accomplishments of the Wildrose Party, because I think a lot of people, say like me, who are at the opposite end of the political spectrum, were honestly impressed with the way the Wildrose handled themselves in opposition over the last few months. They were an immensely effective opposition. They really did expose corruption and waste in Alison Redford's government. They led to the downfall of Alison Redford. They kept the Tories' feet to the fire. They really asked important questions about the blurring of party money and public money. They did really a very solid job in opposition. And I'm sorry, I'm not a conservative. I'm not a Wildrose person. I'm not personally feeling betrayed by this. But as somebody who's on Team Democracy, I think it is a tribute to what the Wildrose accomplished that people feel this angry at what's happened this week.
I love Alberta politics.
But
well, this days you got to wonder.